My dissertation is titled History, Implementation, and Pedagogical Implications of an Updated System of Functional Analysis. And we'll get started. My dissertation follows the history of functional ideas and their pedagogy, gives examples of the implementation of my updated system of functional analysis, and discusses the pedagogical implications that this updated system implies. The main goal is to present an updated system of functional labeling that is as pedagogically friendly as possible in order to assist students and teachers of harmony to more easily and enjoyably learn, teach, and engage with common practice-era tonal harmonic practice. This lecture will cover the highlights of my paper as much as possible within time constraints. After the introduction detailing my goals and motivations, I will start with a brief look at Riemann for historical beginnings, then move to other, more recent functional writers. The bulk of the talk will cover the basics of implementing the system, and I will conclude with some of the wider curricular implications of using the system. You have handouts with a quick little outline that helps you follow along, and then I will mention each musical example as we come to it. The goal of this project is not to offer a new theory of function. Generally, the common understanding of tonal function in common practice music is not much debated. There may be nuances and differences of approach, but in general, people agree on what they mean when they say time or dominant. What I am trying to accomplish is an updated system of labeling function for pedagogical purposes. The current methods available for talking about function are complex, uncommon, or adapted from some other purpose. My aim is to build a system that leaves out needless complexity and is highly user-friendly. I am not necessarily trying to arrive at new analytical outcomes. Instead, I aim to show that we can achieve current analytical outcomes more quickly and simply if we focus on function by using labeling that clarifies the analysis process, thereby allowing students a faster and less frustrating access to more interesting musical theoretical territory. My updated system is based in part on Hugo Riemann's Funktionstheorie. I will use Funktionstheorie auf Deutsch when referring to the German historical practice and functional analysis when referring to my own adaptation. I have borrowed many of Riemann's functional ideas, but focused very little on the transformational ideas that are now associated with the neo-Riemannian theory, for anyone who knows about that. With this borrowing, my system of functional analysis closely resembles the type of analysis currently in use in Germany, but I have translated and adjusted it for English-speaking use to maximize easy implementation. Additionally, I have adapted functional analysis to flow smoothly into Schachterian-type reductive ideas. The focus of functional analysis is common practice-era music and tonality, but there's also some room for expansion into other genres, which I cover in my dissertation, but for which we don't really have time today. I have designed functional analysis such that it can often provide insights into common practice tonality more quickly than current methods, principally by encouraging a combination of short and long-term thinking to more quickly identify interesting harmonic occurrences. This could prove a boon to performers and musicians who mistakenly see music theory as forbidding and difficult. I want performers and musicians of all types to be able to use theory to their advantage, to find theory undaunting and maybe even fun. Since many of us still deal with common practice-era functional tonality, and those who don't still are often in dialogue with common practice music, I believe that making this type of music easier to understand on a deeper level could help many musicians of many different types. One may wonder why I would like to implement a whole new system instead of just adapting current methodologies to my purposes. My dissatisfaction with current Roman numeral analysis mostly stems from a square peg round hole problem. Roman numerals just were not designed to fit the job we are currently asking them to do, and so an attempt to further adapt them would only make them more confusing, not less. For example, in Roman numerals, when students might get sidetracked by trying to reason out how figure bass symbols for inversions instead of just hearing the bass line, functional analysis provides a solution by separating the labeling for upper and lower voices. When students are struggling to integrate horizontal and vertical dimensions of music, the different levels of functional analysis can help provide context. When performance majors profess not to care about or need theory, they need to practice. I feel that functional analysis can help promote a good sense of phrasing, which then can make practicing and memorizing easier, and also a thorough understanding of harmony makes intonation easier as well. The philosophy behind this functional analysis system, with a big to small emphasis, is the philosophy of rewarding what information the students are already grasping and not marking them down for concepts we haven't reached yet, encouraging errors, period, and framing many of these errors as differences of precision, as is often the case. History. With the limited time for this talk, I will be skipping over some of the earlier predecessors to functional analysis, such as Rameau, and instead focusing on the most obvious historical figure, Riemann. Hugo Riemann intended his theories for use in conservatories and universities. He first coined the term function in his Vereinfachte Harmonielehre, or simplified harmony, of 1893, using it to mean a relationship between chords, similar to the original mathematical definition of function, relating argument and value. Here is his first definition of function. There are only three kinds of tonal functions, namely tonic, dominant, and subdominant. In the change of these functions lies the essence of modulation. That is, if a chord changes function, it implies a different tonal center. Or if the tonal center changes, the functions will change as well. This means that Riemann's system of functional labels is based on the idea that chords relate to cadence, which is the only way that we can firmly establish a tonality. Therefore, Vereinfachte Harmonielehre expands on these three relations to the cadence. Now, any of Riemann's treatises can be a very dense read, whether you're in English or in German, and Alexander Rading's 2003 book, Hugo Riemann and the Birth of Modern Musical Thought, helps reframe Riemann in terms more approachable to modern thinkers. He also explores Riemann's philosophical background and motivations, and clarifies many concepts, as well as the philosophical context in which Riemann was working. Sometimes, Riemann himself is unclear on how he is using his terminology. Depending on how you define function, as a chord, an idea of some other conglomeration, has repercussions in more extended situations, but in most common practice area music, multiple definitions of function overlap and reinforce each other. Riemann's function, for us, might be most productively thought of as a specific interpretation of a chord. These chords are interpreted following expectation fulfillment patterns that many musicians are already familiar with. For example, this chord is interpreted in a certain way based on formal context, pitches, and prior familiarity with other simple chords. Yep. For Riemann, function came first, and he would often describe chords using complicated contortions to emphasize that, even if it meant taking longer to understand what the individual notes were. To him, how we understand the chord is more important than what it looks like. For example 1, in your handout, even if a highly chromatic chord such as an augmented 6 should follow the dominant, Riemann labels it as a tonic, albeit highly altered, to show the expectation fulfillment pattern. The complexity of the label does something to show how unexpected the resolution is. That's not the chord you expect there. For Riemann, the visual aspect of the score was irrelevant, because the psychology of what the music sounded like was more important. The score was merely a way in which the composer conveyed his thoughts to the listener. Also, part of Riemann's interest in backing up his theories with acoustics was the desire to appear as a natural scientist, because scientists of his time enjoyed a great deal of prestige. One of the things Riemann was reacting against was what he viewed as the prevailing ideas of Stufentheorie, a predecessor to our current Roman numeral practice. Function theorists wanted to bring attention to the relative importance of triads and not call every triad built on any scale step equal, as they perceived Stufentheorists to be doing. So for current trends, in addition to historical Funktionstheorie, there are a few recent scholars dealing with types of functional analysis that I'd like to discuss. Ian Quinn has designed one of the more prominent recent teaching methods that discards Roman numerals. Quinn uses what he calls functional base symbols, which focus on base motion and the functional driving harmonies. Roman numerals are used only to indicate modulations and key areas. Example 2.4 in your handout is from Quinn's class notes, showing how function and base scale degrees are used to indicate chords. A progression of 1, 5, 6, 4, 1, 6 is analyzed as T1, D2, T3. The lowercase letter to the right of the labels indicates the hand position of the right hand in a keyboard-style texture. Parentheses show how long the prolongation lasts. I'm just playing the first three. functional base symbols and my incarnation of functional analysis is that Quinn's focus is on the exclusive preeminence of the base. If there were a spectrum from slice by slice triad thinking on one end to purely linear counterpoint on the other, Quinn's functional base symbols lie nearer to the purely linear end than my functional analysis. Another example of functional base analysis shows up at the University of Buffalo with Charles J. Smith in an as of yet unpublished textbook, but I believe he has been using his method for at least a decade, if not 3. Due to time, I will not expound on the details of his system, but I did want to mention him and look at the following example 2.5 on the next page in your handout. The chart shows the many different types of labels Smith uses: chord letter names, Roman numerals, figure base, and what different aspects of harmony they best represent. In introducing these different labels, he comments on their ability to show certain facets of a chord. For example, figure base has been an excellent performer shorthand, and chord letter names have proven useful to improvisers, while Roman numerals help show root pitch in context to key. I would argue that functional analysis has some capability to show all 7 of these chordal facets by blending multiple ideas together. Obviously, functional analysis labels shows function, but it also shows diatonic and scale context, and the separated inversion base layers show both base and inversion. Separating the base from the root of the chord and tying the root of the chord to the function shows the root separate from the base, which neither Quinn nor Smith's systems show. Using lowercase letters and minor keys provides modal association as well. And you'll see the details of that. Another author interested in doing Roman numerals in a non-standard way is David Damschroeder. Much of his writing is about Schenkerian analysis, but in a recent book on Schubert, Damschroeder lays out a new methodology for using Roman numerals in a prolongational way, not unsimilar to how I conceive of using layers for functional analysis. Damschroeder also advocates a big picture first analytical lens, much as I do. In his quest to transform analysis, Damschroeder includes the following among the casualties: applied dominance, upper and lowercase Roman numerals which show quality, figure-based notation wedded with Roman numerals, and coordinate names, such as the German argument 6. For my part, while I'm happy to see figure-based and coordinate names go away, I find doing away with applied dominance and upper and lowercase qualities counterproductive. However, Damschroeder, having done away with these particular things, is not unexpected, as they are fairly well-known discards for Schenkerian scholars. While still using Roman numerals, Damschroeder is more interested in large-scale voice-leading energies and provides a system that includes inversions separate from the bass pitch, the concept of chords missing roots, and chords that are related by third, all ideas that are present in my functional analysis. Let us now move on to the basic implementation of my labels. But before we start, I will reiterate and go into more detail on the philosophy of how I've constructed these labels. These functional labels highlight several other things in addition to function, drawing attention to the following aspects of music and harmony: cadence, non-scalar organization, base-oriented analysis, and large span analysis. Functional analysis is based on the cadence, not the scale. The beginning of function is to hear the chords as they create metaphorical motion towards a cadence. The stability of the tonic exists only in relationship to the desire of the dominant to resolve in a cadence to create closure. In some musical styles, different sounds can represent these desires. Today we will focus on counterpractice now. Because of this cadential focus, chords are organized in terms of relationships of fifths or thirds, not linearly ordered in a scale. Scale is primarily a melodic horizontal phenomenon, while harmony is primarily vertical. Although melody and harmony are interrelated, beginning with a more vertical harmonic conception helps to differentiate between harmonic and melodic processes. Because of music's temporal nature, it rarely makes sense to completely divorce the vertical and harmonic dimensions, but having a clear conception of what is more prominent at which times can be useful. Functional analysis encourages orientation towards the bass. Bass pitches provide the foundation on which each function is built. The pitch content of a chord is less important than how it is functioning, and therefore, motion in the melody can happen over the bass without necessarily changing the function. Because of this allowance for motion over a functional bass, triads are important, but not to exclude them. Bass-oriented function is more important than the triad. If a given sonority has a strong sense of function but does not stack in thirds to form the expected functional triad, the function supersedes the triad. The most obvious case of this is 2, 6, which we'll get to later. While analysis using functional analysis symbols will begin with the base, the labels themselves are not base-oriented, but triad-group-oriented. This is an important distinction between functional analysis and the figures that accompany Roman numerals. In those figures, all intervals are shown as a base. In functional analysis, all intervals are shown as a group, regardless of whether the group is in the base or not. Finally, and most importantly, larger span-oriented analysis comes first, as students must understand phrase fillers before harmonic details. Starting large at more background levels allows students to come to grips with longer stretches of music sooner. It also makes phrase construction a natural part of analysis at the first stages of analysis. In this context, there are no cadences without the concept of a phrase, as cadences and phrases help define each other, and that harmonic motion which defines a phrase is founded on the most important functional pillars. Functional analysis emphasizes a big to small approach. Once the big idea concepts are in place, it is much easier to add detail instead of starting with detail and trying to zoom out. The first examples introduce the primary functions in the context of cadences. So examples 3.1 and 3.2. In example 3.1, we see the basic outline of a perfect authentic cadence in C major. Perfect authentic cadences work the same in minor keys, as seen in example 3.2 in A minor. This perfect authentic cadence includes our primary functions, tonic, dominant, and predominant. Tonic is stability, dominant is tension, predominant is transition. In major keys, the primary functions are associated with major triads, while in minor keys, they are associated with minor triads. In minor, dominant is the exception to this rule because one of the pitches that most defines dominant function is the raised leading tone, creating a major triad on the scale of 5. Capital letters indicate major triads, while lowercase letters indicate minor triads, as is already familiar. After primary functions, the next level of detail is substitute functions. Fill out the diatonic chordal vocabulary. Substitute functions occur in situations in which another chord replaces a primary function and stands as a substitute for variety, prolongational purposes, or as in the deceptive cadence. There are 2 types of substitutes, relative substitutes and variant substitutes, shown in 3.3 and 3.4, illustrating these substitute types for the tonic triad in major and minor. Substitute functions are perceived as related to primary functions, at least partially because they share 2 pitches in common for each pair. See example 3.3. The middle of the 3 chords is the tonic. If do and mi are kept constant, but so changes to la, then this shift forms the first substitute function, the relative, as seen in the chord on the left. The relationship between the primary function to its relative is the same as that between 2 relative keys. Hence, a major triad's relative chord has a diatonic third below, C to A, while a given minor triad has a relative with a root a diatonic third above, A to C, as in example 4. A substitute function chord will be the opposite quality of the primary function chord it relates to. For major primary function triads, their substitutes are minor, while for minor primary function triads, their substitutes are major. The label is designed to show the relationship between the primary and substitute functions. In this case, the primary function to which this chord is related is major, shown with capital T, but the chord itself is minor, shown with a small r. The reverse is true in minor. The reference primary function is minor, small t, and the substitute function is major, large r. To uncover the variant relationship, hold different 2 notes constant, mi and so, and change do to t, as in the second half of the example. The variant is a diatonic third in the opposite direction from the relative relationship. This reverse relationship is shown in example 3.4. This relationship was originally known as a light tone dorsal, leading tone exchange, because do is exchanged for t. I chose to name this relationship variant because it uses an orthography and phonologically distinct letter in abbreviations. Remember that the R or the V will show the quality of the substitute function triad, while the T or the P will show the quality of the related primary function. Predominant substitutes are formed in the same way as tonic substitutes, as seen in examples 3.5 and 3.6. Notice that a relative and variant of the same primary function, such as the two tonic substitutes TR and TB in example 3.7, share a fifth root relationship. Also note that TR and PV are the two labels for the same triad in a major key, as seen in 3.8, and likewise TV and PR in a minor key, as in 3.9. This is possible because the triad built on scale degree 6 can sometimes be a tonic replacement, but also serves predominant function at other times. The relationships between relative chords, variant chords, and their primary functions can also be visualized on a tone notes, seen in examples 3.10 and 3.11. These two diagrams show how some chords are related to two different functions and how parallel and relative major and minor are different but similar. With a full gamut of diatonic chords available through primary and substitute functions, the next step to learning this system is Arabic numerals, which show even more detail. For added tones, such as the seventh above the root, indicate a 7. For other intervals, include synonymous numbers, which you can see in example 3.16, which is a reduction of measures 24 through 31 of J.S. Bach's Prelude in C major from the well-tempered Clavier, Book 1. The bass holds the dominant pedal, and the numerals indicate the voice leading in the moving lines of the upper voices. Here, the numerals are all listed in descending order. In this, superscripts can sometimes resemble familiar figured bass patterns. Chromatic pitches are indicated in the superscripts with sharps and flats, as in measure 28. With so many voices, one may choose to list all superscripts in numerical order, or one may have each voice leading strand stay in the same position in the superscript, as demonstrated in example 3.17. Now, the superscripted numerals, while still showing the intervals above the root, keep different upper voices in order from top to bottom as they move across the excerpt. This can help highlight voice leading specifics. Labeling of inversions is where these Arabic numerals diverge from the familiar formulas of figured bass. As stated earlier, functional analysis highlights the root of the triad when showing inversions by using Arabic numerals that are intervals from the root, as opposed to intervals that are from the bass, as in Roman numerals. When a note other than the root is in the bass for inverted chords, the bass pitch is indicated with a numeric subscript, as seen in example 3.18. This is a time triad with the third in the bass. A larger functional area can clearly be seen in the next example, 3.19, which shows a phrase length model harmonic progression. The tonic prolongation is where most of the chords are related to time, quickly identified by labels that have T's in them. Two of the chords in this phrase have a different conceptualization from the current standard practice and are isolated in examples 3.20 and 3.21. For the case of the P6 in example 3.20, the Roman numeral label would be 2.6, whereas someone unfamiliar with functional analysis might unknowingly translate P6 to 4.6, a different sonority entirely because bass and upper voice numerals are not separated. Because the 6 is in an upper position, the label P6 indicates a sixth above the root fa, while 2, 6, and 4 in Roman numerals look vastly different in label, and they are distinct sonorities. Their aural difference is often somewhat trivial and does not change the strength of the function. In functional analysis, attention is drawn to the similarities rather than to the differences between these two sonorities as different flavors of one function. The label in 3.20 highlights the strength of the predominant function, showing a triad based on fa, where the sixth has replaced the fifth. both numbers would be indicated. For superscripts in functional analysis, the general rule is that even numbers typically replace odd ones. If 6th is present, the 5th will not be. If 4th, not 3rd. If 2, not 1, unless otherwise indicated. Additionally, for odd intervals of 7th and larger, pitches are generally added to the chord and not replacing any other pitches. Any number that might have been previously replaced can be added in as a reminder in following chords. Now look at example 321. In functional analysis, this chord is conceived of as a dominant 7 that happens to be missing its root. So, and then the missing root is the absence of which is shown with the slash through the symbol. This then proceed as labeling as usual thus far, with the 3 for the third above the missing root as the pitch in the bass, and add an extra 7 and 9 to indicate the pitches in the upper voices. Examples 322 and 323 show a model harmonic progression in minor labeled with both Roman numerals and functional analysis. Many of the previously discussed concepts are here demonstrated in context of a constructed phrase. These also illuminate the case of the 5-6-4. The second part of this phrase would be known in many current Roman numeral practices as a passing 5-6-4, and the third to last chord as the cadential 5-6-4. In my teaching experience, having the same label applied to two different functions, sonorities, and pitch collections has always been a point of confusion. However, with functional analysis labels, the upper voices and the bass voices are in separate positions in the label. These two 5-6-4 chords are separated by their function. The cadential chord is related to accented non-chord tones and shown as superscripts, while the passing chord is an inversion and shown as a subscript. While a given set of 3 notes can have more than one label, there is never more than one set of notes for a given label. This leads to the question of which chords might have more than one label. One example shown previously is the chord built on la being either time or predominant function depending on context, back in example 3.8. An additional example that commonly arises is P6 versus predominant relative with third of the bass. While these two labels represent the same 3 pitches of fa, la, re, I usually recommend using the label with the fewest characters as being the simplest explanation. However, context, oral aspects, and personal preference also play into any given decision. There are circumstances in which predominant relative with third in the bass may be more appropriate, such as a tonicization or arpeggio of that particular triad, as shown in example 325. Another difference between functional analysis and Roman numerals is that there are no standalone diminished triads in this system. Primary and substitute functions can all be found on a major-minor triad tonets, similar to examples 310 and 311. The triad built on T, known as 7 diminished, and its related seventh chords are easily related to the dominant with the /D designation as described in example 321. But the half diminished seventh chord built on re in a minor key in root position was a different challenge. I wanted to devise a label that emphasized the strength of its function, its complexity, and its normalcy. When, as shown in the first chord of example 326, this seventh chord is inverted, it is labeled similar to a major key as a minor predominant, fa, la, do, with an added 6 in addition to the normal pivot. To keep simplicity and relationship to the primary label P, the label for the second chord shows the 6th as an added tone in the bass, below the functional root. This might make some people think uncomfortably of Riemann's dualistic practice of keeping the root at the top of the chord in minor and counting all intervals and additions down to mirror the upward direction of major, but it is not that. It is merely showing the strong functional root fa as not in the base of the chord, and all numbers are still intervals above that functional root. One compelling reason for separating the bass and upper voices into sub and superscripts is for bass suspensions. Example 327 is a reduction of measures 8 and 9 of the same Bach prelude used earlier. In figure bass numbers, a descending bass suspension is indicated with ascending numbers, such as 2 to 3. In here, instead, here it is clear to see that the root of the chord is being approached by step from above in a descending motion. on to some basic chromatic harmony. Since relative major and minor keys are closely intertwined in functional analysis, sometimes jumping to parallel major and minor keys for mode mixture borrowing can be challenging. On the other hand, early familiarity with minor of any kind can make it easier to switch back and forth. Plus, there should be little trouble remembering which chords are major or minor, as primary and substitute functions are typically opposite quality triads. Then, when a chord providing a substitute function is the same quality as the primary function, we can know that a chord borrowed from a parallel key is involved. Example 328 shows how tonic prolongation might occur with a borrowed chord. Instead of using the triad built on la, the triad built on lay is borrowed from a parallel minor. Once understood, there is a smooth transition from mode mixture to the more alluring chromatically altered chords. This makes augmented sixth chords in Neapolitan less intimidating to introduce. They are just quick, logical chromatic alterations of predominance in a minor key. Example 329 shows the varieties of augmented sixths as variations of a predominant relative, and example 330 shows the Neapolitan as an alteration of a minor predominant. All chromatic pitches in superscripts show how the voice lead should resolve, with sharps going up and flats going down. On the next page, example 332 shows a brief tonicization or momentary modulation, with the second chord functioning as the dominant of the third chord. When the chords are applied to another chord, as in the case of applied dominance, they are put in parentheses. Multiple chords may be shown in parentheses to indicate extended tonicizations. When these chords resolve in an expected fashion, the chord that follows the parentheses is the object of tonicization. Since the dominant of the dominant is fairly common, it has its own symbol, the superimposed D's, seen in example 333. Also, sometimes known as double dominance, this label can be slashed to indicate diminished sevenths applied to the dominant. Examples 334 and 335 show a less conventional resolution of an applied dominant from Mit den grünen Laubenländer from Schubert's Die schöne Melodie. There are two ways to label this applied dominant. Either draw an arrow back to the reference chord, as in 334, or put the missing resolution following the parentheses in square brackets, as in 335. These two methods will be useful at different times. Sometimes there is a previous chord to refer to, sometimes there is not. Longer modulations of the pivot chord are handled similarly to Roman numeral practices. Any type of labeling that puts the first key on one line and the second key on another works equally well. Example 336 shows how the A minor triad could function as the end of the tonic prolongation in C major, but then pivots meanings to become the predominant relative for G major. Let us now move to some longer examples. Visually, functional analysis labels can quickly guide the observer to larger functional areas of a phrase. If an analyst wants to bring special attention to which details are more or less salient at different levels of harmony, an analysis with multiple layers of functional analysis is possible. This returns to the concept of prolongation. A very detailed layer can show all chords, while a more background layer can emphasize the structural harmonies that are being prolonged by the detailed layer. Example 341 shows the theme from the first movement of Mozart's sonata in A major, K331, with 3 levels of analysis. The lowest level, closest to the staff, has many fine details that are often superfluous to the basic understanding of the phrase, but it could be useful in some contexts. The middle level is something like how I would normally analyze a piece, though there's still at least another level possible between the lowest and the middle. The last level shows the functional phrase pillars with lines indicating how long the tonic prolongations last. I move to the middle level, finessing the large-scale analysis to know where the predominant has a 6 instead of a 5, and to see which chords are embellishing the tone. Handily, the process of adding detail really involves using the eraser side of my pencil, as interpretations are more often added detail than changing roots or chords. For beginning analysis, this method of adding detail is more forgiving than methods that begin with detail before zooming out, and may help keep students from feeling frustrated. The most zoomed-in layer provides some alternate hearings of particular chords. Measure 9, which is here, could be heard as voice-leading motion within the tonic chord, or as a predominant with a 5th in the bass embellishing tonic. Zooming into the predominant in measure 12, this side, shows that it's not just a predominant, but it could also be a predominant with a 3rd in the bass, or it could be predominant variant, but with a 6th instead of a 5, a sharp 6. Some may also hear this as an applied dominant, a /double D with a 5th in the bass, but I prefer the predominant variant with sharp 6 to show the transient voice-leading nature that I perceive in this chord. It's almost like a pseudo-offense chord without offense. This piece could be shown with many more layers than just these 3. The middle layer could be a little more or less detailed depending on the purpose of the analysis. The process of deciding how many layers to use and determining where prolongations start and end at a larger level make the transition from functional analysis to Schenkerian analysis very smooth. Deciding which pitches are important enough for the middle level of an analysis, or which chords are anchoring the prolongations, allows students to start thinking in a more linear fashion. Examples 4.1 and 4.2 show how functional analysis helps lead to better phrase and motivic understanding based on an exercise I did with my experimental class in winter 2014. These two versions of a harmonic analysis of the Bach chaconne from partita in D minor show the chaconne analyzed with Roman numerals and functional analysis. And I put the functional analysis one up on the screen. This comparison allows us to see the functions changing from the stable basis of the chaconne pattern. I'm not going to do this because I know with Roman numerals, it is possible to see the changes as the chaconne pattern mutates. Different predominants are used. The 5 comes in different flavors at slightly different times. However, in order to see these changes, students must first understand that 2 and 4 are both predominants, and have some concept of function in larger phrase structure. But with functional analysis, the functions are not hidden knowledge, but present immediately in the label. The 2 short, low-level cycles through the primary functions, measures 1 and 2, and 3 and 4, are easily apparent, and comparisons could be drawn within the phrase as well as across the phrases. Most changes noted with Roman numeral analysis can be seen as less drastic. For example, merely an added tone in measure 8. Additionally, since functional areas of the phrase are clear, it is easier to see when the predominant area changes length or the dominant starts early. This can lead to a discussion of how the different functional prolongations create tension or interact with melodic motives or bring out different consequential inner voices, a specialty of this type of unaccompanied piece. Admittedly, these discussions can also be fostered with Roman numerals, but a quick, transparent understanding of harmony, harmonic rhythm, and phrase pillars moves the discussion away from vocabulary and naming and towards complex musical ideas sooner. And different people might even have different interpretations of which chords exactly these are, but that was just the ones that we came up with in class in 2014. easily fill goals. Okay, so we're at the last part of this. The last part of the outline. I believe functional analysis can easily fill goals already present in the standard college musicianship curriculum. Goals of functional analysis, emphasizing structure, function, and base motion, are often primary or secondary goals of theory or art skills courses. Additionally, the majority of music students use theory primarily to further other interests in performance or teaching. And functional analysis is designed with these types of musicians in mind. The simplicity and additive nature of functional analysis was in part designed as a reaction to freshman difficulties, allowing students to tell me what they know and not worry about what we may not have gotten to yet. An ambitious program could use functional analysis for the entire theory core program, but I imagine that it may first find a home in graduate theory review courses. This type of course could be an ideal first home because functional analysis provides an easy-to-learn vocabulary for those students who are concentrating on other highly developed skills. Functional analysis can help bring theory to relevance for these students, and if they no longer remember Roman numerals, they are unlikely to ever be tested on that again, so there's little downside to using a non-standard system. Depending on the institution, a graduate review may focus primarily on harmony, or it may focus on a wider range of music theory applications. In Chapter 4 of my dissertation, I present a review format where harmony is subsidiary to engaging with music relevant to that particular class of students, encouraging the students to use their primary specialty to inform the goals of the class. As stated, I believe the simplicity of functional analysis makes it an ideal candidate for a first-year musicianship curriculum. However, if students were to learn functional analysis from the beginning, they may also need to be conversant in Roman numerals to attend other institutions or communicate with other scholars. For this part of curricular integration, Roman numerals and figure base can be taught as historical practices after solid analytical and conceptual foundations are built. It is possible to partially use functional analysis in conjunction with a theory core curriculum one doesn't have complete control over, or a book that one is required to use. Most current texts already use tonic, predominant, subdominant, and dominant as terms for some concepts. Continuation of these ideas is useful, and functional analysis could be used as a way to show your work when determining Roman numerals for students who are still struggling through all the steps. Here, let's do it. So, remember back to freshman theory, when you're still struggling to read treble clef. Which sounds like this. Right? So, first, you identify the function. You obviously have it in some sort of context. And that function is predominant in this context. Second, you would identify the base, the lowest note. This is fa or F. Third, identify other characteristic pitches or tendency tones that are elsewhere in the chord. This one has both re and do. So those are all the important notes that you need to know about. The student now has already understood the chord, but then instead of we said it sounded predominant. We have the root in the base, and there's 5 and 6. Okay. So putting that down, the student understands the chord, but then in order to turn in a Roman numeral answer for whatever reason, you can teach them to translate that to Roman numeral 265 by undoing and doing third stacking or memorizing something or something. The bonus to using functional analysis instead of Roman numerals is that each of these steps contribute to the answer without the last translation step. In each step, the student can write the information they have already found and then rarely have to erase it, and thereby get some partial credit, even if they didn't get all the details, as well as allowing the teacher to see the thinking process. Some students might begrudge the extra work of learning two systems if one were to attempt to teach functional analysis alongside a Roman numeral text, but others may appreciate the opportunity to show their work and go through the steps slowly. In my experience, core concepts that students must analyze with Roman numerals are also easier to identify in oral skills from a functional perspective. While students may eventually write 2, 6, or 4, asking them to first listen for predominantness leads to more success. Also, identifying the 707 as just a weird 5 chord helps them to connect with the context it will most likely be found in, or on which bass notes it occurs. So, while we may have our students submit dictations with Roman numeral analysis written underneath, the concepts still can be presented functional. 2, 6, and 4 are synonyms, 7 is the dominant, and should result in time. This type of presentation of these concepts is fairly prevalent in my teaching and learning experience. Functional analysis analysis just brings to the fore what we are often more clumsily trying to explain. In conclusion, there is obviously much that I haven't covered, and we do have time for questions. My goals for the continuation of functional analysis lie less in research, but more in teaching applications. I hope that functional analysis can find a home in various courses throughout the music theory curriculum, whether that be review courses or the core curriculum. I particularly hope that functional analysis can provide musicians of many types new and fruitful ways of looking at harmony to enrich their listening, performing, and teaching of music. Thank you. If you have places to be at 5, feel free to get her off. But if you want to stay and talk and have questions, I can have anything else. Noah.
Talk about some about chromatic changes. I was wondering about those when the closest related note there is a modification of the level. So let's say you're in a major key and you're going to have a minor chord built off of flat 6. Mm-hmm. How are you going to write that?
Well, then I would use a borrowed label from the minor.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that you also have a flat 1.
So if we're in C major, I'm just going to be in C major all day because it's easier for my brain. So if we wanted to go from tonic to a chord built on flat 6 that was also still flat, because who likes C flat besides harpists? Well, then, so the A flat major chord that this is sort of related to is the tonic variant in minor.
Yeah.
And so this is a tonic variant. So the small B.
But wouldn't that be built on A?
No. Small T means that you're built on lay or may. So when you're building third related chords, a small t or a small p indicates that you're built off of
I see. So even
3 or 6.
Even though you're in a major key, you're showing small t.
So basically, you might have to explain that depending on the context that you're using it in, but basically you're always in a parallel major minor tonality where all major and minor chords are available.
Okay.
Jack?
I'm glad that you put the P65 up on the board because that's one chord that I do sort of have a question and a problem with.
Okay.
And it's the same problem that occurs, in traditional figure bass when we see that chord. Basically, how do I know the fifth above the bass is a dissonance that has to resolve down? If you visualize it as 2/7, and then C is a 7, then of course 7's have to resolve down. But in that symbolization of it, how do I know that note has to resolve?
So the resolution of this chord is to dominant, which would be, just said I wasn't changing. Probably something like this with maybe a 7th, depending on the spacing and the voicing. So that, while you're completely correct that the 2/7, knowing the 7th resolves down is a thing, I found that this sort of voice leading thing is, once you have an injunction against parallel fifths, then you're not going to accidentally put the 7th up anyway because then you have parallel fifths. And it's still a thing that you can reference. Oh, if you do stack it in in thirds, it's a 7th and 7ths resolve down. But most of the time, I found that having the 7 be a 7 no matter where you put it. So if we have the 7th in the bass, then this is D with the 7 in the bass. And then so instead of having to memorize that 5/4/2 always goes to 1/6, you're like, oh, there's a 7th in the bass. 7ths go down. And then you don't have to translate from the figure bass in that case. So that's probably the one case in which it's a little bit fuzzier for voice leading. But most of the time I found that the Arabic numerals are better for voice leading because they're always from the root instead of something else.
Except when we disagree on
what the root is, yeah. But I still, whenever I hear this chord, I still hear the root as fa. And that's, Well, and then the other thing is that half the time you're resolving to a cadential 6-4 anyway, right? So like that, and then it's holding over, and the resolution comes in the next part, and you already have that written into the cadential 6-4 part. So it could be as simple as saying, well, if you wrote a P65, please go to cadential 6-4. You don't have to worry about it. Which is the same thing that we say for German argument 6 or whatever.
Or you might say something along the lines of, well, it's 6-5, and since the 6 and 5 are sort of clumped together,
Yeah. They have
5
to
has
move
to
away.
move away from
Yeah.
the 6.
If you have two notes, right, yeah, if you have two notes right next to each other, it's kind of,
They have to expand.
Kind of Rameau came up with that problem,
Yeah.
where when he has the subdominant with the added 6,
Yeah.
it's actually the 6 that he considers to be the dissonance, which must resolve up.
Right.
So that's, I mean, he considered the cadential 6-4 to be a 1 chord, so that was,
Yeah.
that's his basis.
There are some things about remote that make a lot of sense, and then there's the rest of it. So,
Yeah, I was noting that you didn't cite Gabriel Miller's dissertation on functional idea order.
never heard of
I
him.
think it would be very useful for
Okay.
you. He's a Ohio State grad from, I think, 2005, and his dissertation is called something like The Death and Resurrection of Function. And he kind of
Which
starts
university was that? Sorry.
Ohio State. He's a student of Gregory Proctor. What's interesting to me is he starts the whole dissertation with a little vignette, and he talks about applied dominant 5 of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And he notes, and this is something that I kind of never thought of until I read his first couple pages, he notes that we call this an applied dominant, but we also say that it's a predominant. Right? Because it's a predominant, because it's 5 of 5, so
Yeah.
so when you're
Eventually, it's going. Yeah.
like, and any of the textbooks that have the PD underneath the thing now would consider that to be predominant, but then we would also consider it to be dominant.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that in your system, you retain the dominantness of an applied dominant, and you're kind of not noting that there's a predominant, that it ultimately functions as predominant.
In a Schenkerian sense.
Well, I mean, even in your sense here, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a chromatic modification of a predominant chord. And in your K331 example,
Oh yeah.
measure 12, you kind of just said, oh, I like to hear that as predominant with the third in the bass and a chromatically raised root or whatever, if you're thinking roots. But it's sort of like, well, also you could just consider that to be dominant of the dominant, and that seems to be it would look very different on the page.
That's true. I mean, I guess you could sort of do a similar thing where you had predominant relative or relative that was then made major, so it was R.
we are also kind of making a special case for
Yeah.
the double dominancy that can be something for it to stand out to say this particular one we're making it different, not just because otherwise there's no reason to make anything different. It's just another tonicization of something that's not the tonic.
Yeah.
And so the very fact that you were saying it's a double dominant could be a reason to talk about the fact that
That's
it's also
true.
acting as a predominant.
Yeah, because you can still use the parentheses notation for dominant of the dominant, but the fact that there's a different label for it lets it stand out a little bit.
So maybe you would distinguish that use. Maybe you would say you use the parentheses thing if you're kind of hanging out there for a little while, or if you're not going directly from there to the tonic again, and you use the double dominant when it's acting as a predominant.
That's interestingly enough, that's the same reason that Dan Schroeder doesn't allow 5
Right.
of 5.
Yeah.
He uses Roman numerals, but he calls that chord the surging 2.
Well, it's because, he has all sorts of fun vocabulary for that. But all of his, anything built on Ray is a capital Roman numeral too. I'm just not used to
I
that.
have a question for Drew. So, are you saying that, like, if you look at example 3.33, where there's a double dominant, are you saying that if Christopher really wants to think functionally, he should call that an altered predominant relative?
Well, that's one way in which to do it. I mean, it seemed like from the beginning of the you were talking about phrase structure and cadences, and you're going from tonic to dominant, and in between hitting the predominant.
Yeah.
And here you're kind of going tonic to dominant and then to another dominant.
Right.
So it just seems, Steve, to answer your question for me, I would want to do that, say, think of it as an altered predominant. That would be kind of the way I would go, but this is not.
Right. I don't know. I mean, there's also phrases that don't have a predominant. So.
But is this the dominant? I mean, is this the
No.
beginning of the dominant?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting question. So it's and it would depend on the context too. Like, is this a small chord that's embellishing and leading to the dominant, or is this a thing that lasts for 3 bars?
And it seems like when you were talking about the chaconne, you were saying, hey, look, you can see the similarities in the chord progressions, even though sometimes it's 2 and sometimes it's 4 and sometimes it's 6 or whatever. It seems like you would want to do the same thing, where sometimes you have a diatonic predominant, and sometimes you have an altered predominant.
Right.
And you know, a lot of times those are going to be presented in similar ways, yet your labels would look totally different. So you would kind of not be able to do things you want.
No, I think that's a good idea. The idea is to have more different things available, more different labels to describe how each person hears it. And some people hear this differently than others. That was just what I came up with in a hurry making a lesson plan 2 years ago. And if somebody else were to hear it and say, no, I hear this predominant area lasting longer and being dramatized, then it would be very useful to have a different label to show how that works.
It does seem like no matter what, it serves 2 functions, and so
Yeah.
you're going to either have to double up or miss something.
Yeah.
I mean, the annoying thing was I have a comment and a question, but they're actually very different. The comment is just a word of praise. I like that. I feel like your theory, your system deals well with 6 chords, for example. Like, what is the 6th chord doing? Is it a predominant? Is it a tonic variant? I mean, if you were to imagine a progression that goes C, F, A, F, you could treat the A chord as, I think it's right, a predominant variant, right?
Yeah.
But if you go from 1 to 6 to 4, then you can treat the 6th chord as a tonic relative. That kind of discrimination.
I think I cut that example from the top because there's one where I use it as the end of there's a minor tonic variant and then you add 6 and suddenly it's a predominant. So I've got one of those, and then I've also got an example for Mozart where it's sort of bridging. It's also sort of it's weird because it's sort of part of the dominant prolongation, but it sort of has its own applied dominant, and it sort of looks like it might be tonic, and it sort of looks like it might be predominant, but it's definitely not as important as the dominant that's happening. Well, you could use a whole bunch of things there, and here are some of them. So I particularly like that.
My point is just that we've been talking about dominance and predominance, but I think that this also helps to explain the function of tonic chords. There are just fewer baskets to put in this. Nice thing about the theory. I have one quick question about Ian Quinn. Not maybe about Ian Quinn, but about Ian Quinn's theory.
Right.
So his numbers indicate the
scale degree
of the bass, right?
Yeah.
And yours, obviously,
It's from the root.
It's from the root. Did you give any thought to whether you wanted to do what he's doing, or maybe can you comment on the benefits or drawbacks of having the scale degree in the bass indicator?
Yeah, so I got his class notes and the script of his SMT talk from 2005 or whatever, and emailed back and forth with him a little bit 3 or 4 years ago. And the comments in the SMT talk is that he is doing this from a composing perspective. He wants his students to be able to compose phrases. And so to do the bass lines from scale degree numbers was one of the ways that he did that. And that's also the reason that he uses the figured bass shorthands and keyboard style, is for those compositional purposes. But since I was trying to get away from figured bass, I really didn't want to, like, when I first encountered this theory, I was like, why more figured bass? I was trying to go away from that. And emphasizing the root versus the base part of my theory. I found that was the thing that I wanted to emphasize, was the root versus base function, and so then that way then you can tell what the root is, if that's relevant. I mean, there is often cases where you don't really care what the root is, and then you're doing one of those like middle to upper level ones, where you're like, whatever, it's sort of talky. Which happens a lot in my class. But if you're like, well, I really want to know what the root of that triad is for, because I want to write an arrangement of this piece, or because I need to know for intonation or whatever, then you can zoom in and put another letter next to your T and say, well, it's not relative, and that means that we need to pay attention to the sixth or whatever. That's my
I'm glad you brought up composition, because I was going to ask you if you thought that this would be useful in composition.
I primarily design it from an analysis perspective because I find that that's usually what we're more worried about doing in the core curriculum is we have performers, and yes, it'd be cool if everybody composed, but mostly they're like, oh gosh, I need to learn this Bach in 2 weeks before my teacher looks at me angrily. And so having something that is specifically designed from an analysis perspective, that was one of the goals. I think it can also be sort of backdoored to be in a compositional way, and I've definitely done some work with making it not terrible for voice leading exercises and sort of the small sort of compositional things that we do in theory class. And that's another reason that I really like using the Arabic numerals the way that I do is for those type of things. But
Do you have you talk about how the kind of TPD or TPDT has to go in that order?
I would if I were writing a textbook. This has not turned into a textbook yet, and I was trying not to let it turn.
Because I noticed you have, there's what many would call a pedal 6/4.
Yeah.
And measure 9, 10, and 11 in the K-1, and you analyze it as TPT.
Yeah.
So that is kind of, if I were a student, I would say, okay, P stands for predominant, and here it is not predominant, it's pre-time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have an answer to that.
Yeah, and so that might be one reason to say, no, in this case we would more likely label it as T6/4 than 5, but I just wanted to show that there have been different interpretations of that chord in the past, and that's one way to label 4 with 5 in a basic case you were wondering, sort of thing. So yeah, in this instance, usually I would use the 6/4, but I just wanted to use some different, maybe more questionable interpretations in some of the smaller labels, just to have different ones there, so that people can see comparisons of possibilities. But yeah, I agree. I think that normally you would try to keep all the pieces together and then have the piece with the piece or whatever as much as possible. But there's definitely cases where you have, prolongations that are sort of sorry?
I have a question on when you had a class, right? And you taught this to the class. Do you have any results?
So we started with 6 and ended with 5 students, and 2 of them were sophomores at the time. 1 was a freshman at the time. 1 was like a senior, and 2 were seniors. I had 2 sophomores. 1 of them dropped. 1 was a freshman, and 1 was not a music major. And they all kept up. We covered all of chromatic harmony in 10 weeks. Yes.
So did they have an opinion, or I imagine you asked them, or maybe they didn't know enough about Roman numerals to compare?
Well, the sophomores and the seniors certainly did.
Oh,
And
that's right.
they liked this better overall. They thought it was faster and more intuitive. And a couple of them were like, I'm going to use this forever in my own stuff, but I'm going to stop using it in your room. I don't know. I still run into them in the hallways. I'll have to check if they're actually doing that. But the kid who was a freshman said that it really helped him frame the concepts that he was learning in oral skills from a functional perspective.
And perhaps, I don't know, maybe they commented on performance, if it helped, or...
I don't think we got quite that far, but I did have them do their final projects as like, here's a piece that you're going to play. Please do an analysis of a piece that you are working on. And then I think we even played some in the class.
like earlier in the beginning of the lecture, you mentioned like what could be used in different like
Oh, yeah.
music, but like we're focusing on tonal bass, and I also noticed that on the back of like the
Oh, yeah.
references got a something by Schoenberg, and I was wondering if perhaps
No.
this was known. I thought so, I just wasn't sure.
Schoenberg wrote a tonal harmony
That
textbook,
makes sense.
and so that's what that is. I did a large or medium textbook survey of textbooks from 1893 or when was that? 1873 through the present, and so that was one of the mid-century textbooks that I was looking at in my textbook survey. What I'm talking about for extensions is more like pop, jazz, and like we're slightly tonal-oriented chromatic harmony, like the Dvorak.
It could be used for early
Dr. Russell.
Since you brought up pop music now, I was actually curious how you would need to adapt this for instance, dominant four chord.
Right, so I decided to use S as subdominant, as a tritonic chord. So if 4 is acting as the chord that comes before tonic, then it's not tridominant, it's S, subdominant.
Would you use that for the
Probably. Yeah, and there's lots of places where you can sort of like reuse that back in older conference.
And then what about dominant functioning unique?
Yeah, and so from there, once you have the subdominant and the dominant, most of them can be related by third, 2, 4, or 5. The tritone sub is a variant of the subdominant, and there's the flat 7 is a variant of the dominant. The only one that was really weird was your example where 1 was the dominant. But I did make a footnote, and I was like, you could do this contortion and describe it. And actually, while you're like, well, why would I do the contortion? I'm like, but the contortion shows you how unexpected that dominant is. It shows you how weird it sounds to normal contracted ears. And so to me, sometimes you don't want to do contortions, but sometimes those contortions are informing what your ear is going through to identify it.
That's pretty much Riemann's
Yeah.
analysis, right?
Yeah.
Just contortions to make the
Right.
progression work.
And so, I mean, Riemann, what people have taken from Riemann is now all of those tone nets and, transformational stuff. And there is a little bit of transformational relationships in this, but for the most part, that's not the focus of what this is. I also would be curious to see, like, a good analysis that uses, like, a combination between a neo-Riemannian analysis and a tonal functional analysis for one of those pieces that could sort of do both. I tried to do it with a Chopin analysis I used in the neo-Riemannian class, but it ended up not working well in the context of the paper, so I still have to find a better example of that.
This is a small basic comment. A small thing I appreciate about this is you mentioned your choice of what letters to use if they sounded different.
Yep.
And I can hear that. And so like, very frequently you talk about 564 and that 5 and
That's a lot of
something
numbers.
different than 64.
Yeah.
But here it's numbers mean this and that means that. You still do have the complexity of the superscript, but it's nice having those distinctions.
And Drew, I did decide to take your advice and move to substitute functions this week, but as opposed to secondary functions. But now I have to go back and change that.
What's that change?
Well, so originally I was calling them primary and secondary functions, but people are used to calling them secondary dominants, and so that's confusing.
Which thing?
As TR and TV as secondary functions, but we decided that was not a good idea. It's changed. It saves me like at least like half a paragraph. So.
Sorry.
Yeah, I like don't like I kept trying to search journals to find stuff and it was so hard to find anything. Thanks for coming. I'm just gonna press stop over here.